So this hair dryer that you hear going right next to me is my brand new personal gaming laptop. This was a Falcon Northwest unit. It's got a 13900HX CPU and an RTX 4080 laptop GPU in it that I am currently doing some thermal testing with right now. I'm not doing a full review of this. It's basically the same as like the 4090 we looked at, only it's a 4080 inside of it. But I want to see if I can make this thing quieter and cooler. And to do that means we have to take it apart. Kel, I really hope I don't break it. The new MD7 full tower PC case from Fantex creates the perfect picture frame to show off your system. Insane airflow and direct GPU cooling creates the best possible environment for modern high-power GPUs, while the internal and external cable management systems make building and maintaining your system extremely user-friendly. The integrated DRGB lighting is controlled by an included dual-channel DRGB controller with all new effects, allowing you to make your system uniquely yours. To see the full spec list and options, follow the link in the description below. So I'm running a control right now, which is Speedway in the background. It's an RTX title, pumping as much heat as I can into the 4080. As you can see, we are running in clock speeds anywhere between 2200 to 2400 at low 70s. This is actually pretty impressive considering the fact that it's just a laptop. But because it's the bigger chassis designed for the 4090 with a 4080 in there, that's a lower watt part, it's actually performing pretty well. The CPU is also chilling at 70C. Because it is a shared heat pipe system, when the GPU or the CPU generate heat, it will affect the other component because they are touching each other through the same heat pipes. So that's why the fan curves are pretty much linked. I've got it running maximum fan speed right now, and I'm a little conflicted on this test. Ultimately, I want to see if I can lower the temps by repasting the thermal paste. I don't think it's going to make a difference. Ultimately, I might consider putting, I have Kingpin in here right now, which has dropped the temps on anything I've used it on, even if it's fresh, good thermal paste. I'm debating doing liquid metal. Our limiting factor here ultimately is just the amount of cooling capacity there is in the cooler. Now, when we take it apart, you'll see it. I'm not convinced I'm gonna be able to get these temps down much lower than this. I mean, Phil saw when we did the 4090 review of, although it wasn't a Falcon Northwest, it was an Origin PC. They're both Tom Fang units, like which are ODMs. It was in like the upper 80s, like one to hit 90. But that's a much higher watt part. I think it's 170 watts, 180 watts, something like this, where this is like 150, which is quite a bit less. But if I go automatic fan speed, and so anyway, this is where I'm kind of capped out on my temps, and this is what I'm looking for here. If I get these temps to come down at all under the same static fan speed, that means the PC will be able to operate more quietly at the same temperature when I have the fan curve enabled. So that's just gonna allow me to reduce the acoustics. But if I don't lock the fans, I'll probably still see the same temperatures, but I'd probably see the same temperature at a lower RPM of the fan speed, which I'd rather monitor the temps than just the fan RPM, but I will be looking at both. Anyway, moving on here, if I go to automatic, you can hear it quiets down quite a bit. It only comes down about 1000 RPM, but that's quite a bit of acoustic change. But what you'll notice now is the temperatures will start to climb. So the temperature is already up almost 2C on the CPU, that's 75. It happens fairly quickly, so that's why I go maximum when I'm doing this sort of test. But 71 to 73, 71 on the CPU and like 73 to 74 max on the GPU. Again, not bad. So I'm gonna bump this on maximum fan speed for a couple minutes, cool the unit down, we'll flip it over, open it up, and see if I can tear this apart. I never repasted the 4090 because of the fact that it was not my laptop. So I didn't want to potentially break it. This one is my laptop. This is mine, not for the company. This is mine. I've already spent 4.5 hours sitting in a Starbucks playing Diablo 4 to sort of get acquainted with it. So.
Why were you at a Starbucks?
My wife was getting her hair done and she didn't want to drive to LA, so I drove her and then I sat in Starbucks for 4.5 hours. I also want to point out that our JH2Sense gaming mats also make great work surfaces. So if you need something soft to work on, JH2Sense.com has them ready to go. Our new design and our traditional. Anyway, the thing I love most about these particular laptops is they are designed with serviceability and user openability in mind, because you can upgrade the storage as well as the RAM in these units. They're not soldered in like a lot of companies are doing these days to try and promote you not being able to update your unit. So on this one, the rear comes off. This is just like the 4090, it's exactly the same. And then, just got pop rivets all the way around. Not pop rivets, but tabs. And there's also screws right here in the front. So, if it doesn't come out immediately, easily, Don't just start yanking on it. Same can be said if it doesn't go in easy. Giggity, giggity. There we go. So these 4 screws on the edge of the battery make the battery loose. I want to disconnect the battery because I don't want there being any power going to any of this while I'm working on it. I'm just going to use iFixit little plastic tool to take off the plug right here. There's a lot of little surface doodads around it, so be careful while taking that off. There we go. Now our battery is free. There's numbers on the cooler. So 1, 2, 3, that's 7. This is the order at which you put them back down, by the way, and that's about torquing it all down and squishing the thermal paste and stuff. So I just wanted to point that out. Typically you would take them off in the reverse order, and I think 11 is the highest number we've got right there. And these are spring loaded, so these should be captive. 9, 8, oh wait, there's a 12. Okay, it's 12, 7, 3, 2, 1. Where's 4, 5, and 6? I have a feeling it might be these 3, but they're not numbered because there's no other screws on it. That's captive, that's captive, that's captive. 3, 2, 1. I wonder if this wire is one that works for both. Oh no, the other one's right here. Okay, so it's under the SSD. So let's take the SSD out. So there's that fan wire. So this should be, oh, one more. 13's right here. That's not a captive. So this should just pop out now. There's a lot of thermal paste on that, look at that. The thermal pads on the RAM just disintegrated, as you can see. They just ripped apart, so now I gotta replace those. Quite a bit of thermal paste right here on the CPU. So this is the CPU. It's essentially looks like a desktop, looks very similar to a desktop 13900, only it's a direct die contact. This should be the GPU right here, and this is GPU RAM around it. If it were a 4090, these two would be occupied right there, so that's why there's pads there, but nothing on it. Okay, so I need to clean this up now, and thermal pad application looks pretty good, or like the thermal grease. I'm gonna have to do something about, these are very dry right here, but that's okay. I have additional thermal pads that I can use for the memory. I'm using this spudger, which is plastic, by the way. Do not do this with metal. Feels like dry thermal paste, and it's coming apart like paste, not like a pad. All right, so this is all nice and clean. There's our GPU RAM is nice and clean, our CPU is nice and clean. Now I've got to do the cooler, and then I've got to go source some pads. So you can see the cooling solution, obviously for the GPU is much beefier than the CPU. CPU has one big heat pipe and a little heat pipe going directly to it, and then we've got, it crosses over to the GPU. So you can see that crossover I was talking about. So this is why when the GPU is under load, the CPU heats up too. It's very similar to what people think happens with a water cooling loop, only it doesn't really happen to the degree at which people think it does. 1.63, so yeah, I'd say 1.5 millimeters. Should be fine. It's those thermal paste infused pads, if you will. I mean, all thermal pads have like a paste kind of a deal in them, but these feel almost like what NVIDIA used to use. Only theirs was white and not gray. It's like gray boogers. So these are actually old thermal pads from an EVGA GPU, ironically. And these are much better thermal pads in my opinion. Like they don't break down like you saw. It's also important to make sure they're not too tall. Otherwise then it can't make good contact with the GPU die. But these will squish down. This is just gonna allow me to see if I'm getting good contact with the GPU before I go putting it all back together and then go, why is my GPU overheating? Okay. Who needs sound effects when you have JFX? But it didn't really touch. So these might be too thick, which is why I also brought the thinner ones with me. See how it didn't really, like it touched, but it didn't spread. That's a problem. Actually, it looks like it's because, yeah, it didn't push down inside there. Yeah, see, they were sticking up over the edges of the thing right there. All right, let me get this figured out. All right, by just switching down to the next size thinner thermal pad. I think the other ones had way more squish, and I feel like these up here weren't squished all the way when it was put together, which is why it measured thicker than I needed. Yeah, I know it didn't cover the entire die because of the fact that I had just put a tiny drop on there to see if I was getting good contact. So now that I know I am making good contact, I can clean this off, start again, and then get this mounted down, and probably realize that I went through all of this for no reason whatsoever, because it probably isn't going to help the temperatures. And for those of you saying, Jay, I thought you were going to use liquid metal. The problem with liquid metal, although this doesn't seem like it's that hard to get to, is I don't have a way to keep it from, this would be good because this little protector here would kind of keep it from getting onto anything else on there. But if it were to run somehow into these other areas, like I would need like a foam piece or something to put around here to work as like a moat to keep it from spreading. And because it's going to be in all kinds of different positions and backpacks and stuff, I don't want to worry about it running onto these other SMDs and corroding them and then having the solder joints deteriorate and then things start falling apart. Like realistically, I would need to use my clear nail polish, which I don't have any here, and paint the rest of the CPU here as kind of work as like a conformal coating, even though it is conformal coated, just for extra measure. But because I don't have any of that, is why I'm choosing to just say screw it and go with the Kingpin. Now the Kingpin stuff is really good. If you've never used Kingpin, you're probably missing out because of the fact that it's probably one of the best thermal pastes you can use. That and obviously the Thermal Grizzly stuff. But anyway, that's it now. So I'm going to go ahead and just do an X on here. I'm kind of putting a lot because I want to make sure it gets everything. And it's non-conductive, so it's not like it's going to be a problem. All right, so that's a lot of thermal paste, but that's fine. We want to err on the side of too much thermal paste for direct die cooling than not enough. So I'm going to go ahead and slap this back on there, and we'll just get right back to the temperature testing to see if it mattered. Be Quiet is proud to announce their all-new white Lightwings high-performance ARGB fans, available in 120 and 140 millimeter sizes. All fans are PWM and available in either a 7-blade or a 9-blade high-performance model. Lightwings fans feature ARGB lighting on both the front and the back, allowing for a customized appearance no matter which way the fan is facing. Available in either a single fan or a triple pack with a fan hub included, the new white Lightwings fans from Be Quiet are an obvious choice for PC enthusiasts who demand performance and silent operation. To see the full list of specs and availability, follow the link in the description below. Okay, well, it's hotter. I honestly think it's the thermal pads. I think the thermal pads are keeping the GPU from getting good contact with the cooler. Fortunately, it's easy to take apart. But like we're up to 84C and our clock speed's down to 2100, 2130, 20. Remember we were jumping between like 22 and 24. We're at 85, 86, and it continues to slowly climb. Both fans are working, by the way. So yeah, this is honestly, I think, contact. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to use thermal paste on each one of the memory chips. So I technically have a thinner thermal pad that I could use, but I think I'm going to honestly just try thermal paste on each one, which is actually the way EK used to recommend doing it with their blocks. But it comes down nicely. I mean, it's making contact, but it's just not making great contact. So I'm going to go through all of that again, and then we'll be back. Okay, so I've now put thermal paste on the memory chips. Now we've got really good contact happening with our GPU die. And it's been running for a while now, and it's slowly crept from like 68 to 70. Now it's bouncing anywhere between 68 to 70, with 69 being the medium. But if you look at our frequencies, they're much more stable. Where before they were like up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. They're very stable now in this couple of boost bin range, depending on the part of the test. There's different parts of the test that are harder to run than others, and that's when we hit 70, and then when it gets a little bit easier, we drop down to 68 or 69. But we're looking at nearly a 5C decrease. It was 71 for a second there. We're looking at nearly a 5C decrease between just changing the thermal paste. And we're starting to wonder now, maybe the thermal paste may not have had anything to do with it at all. It could honestly have been, remember how part of the thermal pads were super squished and crumbly and the other parts were like still a square and not squished at all? I'm starting to wonder if maybe those pads didn't allow the cooler to ever sit perfectly flush anyway. And what we're seeing here now is just a really good contact between the cooler, whereas the thermal pads are not causing a problem there. I don't know, I really don't. But this is an improvement no matter what. So now if I go back to automatic fan speed, we would see the temps come up. Right, they should start coming up fairly quickly. See, there we go. But what you'll notice now is it's just, overall, I think the average temps would stay lower. But when I'm gaming on a laptop, I have to expect noise. This is a lot of heat and a lot of wattage for a tiny, you guys saw how small the heat pipes and the whole cooling solution is. But look, just going back to automatic now, it starts to come back up to 100% on its own anyway. But these are, in my opinion, this is a solid improvement for just repasting. Now, like I said, I think thermal or liquid metal might have made a couple of degrees additional difference. It's direct die cooling, so it would certainly have helped. I don't want to take the risk of the liquid metal kind of getting free and dripping somewhere, because this thing sits in a backpack a lot of the times upright. So if it were horizontal all the time, then it's flat, there'd be a little chance of it dripping or somehow leaching into something neighboring. I don't want to take a risk on that. I'd have to come up with, like I said, some sort of solution to keep the thermal paste contained between the cooler and the die, so like a moat around it. That, I don't have anything that would work right now for that. So that's just not, it's not in the cards at the moment, but I might play around with that in the future. Anyway, I just wanted to, this was something I wanted to do. I kind of want to try this with the 4090 GPU that my buddy has, because he's got the same laptop with the 4090 in it. I want to see now if this would make any sort of a difference to the 4090 version. So maybe I'll do a short about that one. Since you guys have already seen the long format, you know the process, I can just reference this video in the short and then be like, here's if it worked or didn't work on the 4090 edition. But ultimately though, with this, what I do feel I gain from this is knowing the thermal paste that I put in there will last a long time. It won't ever get hard or dry out. The Kingpin Extreme, the KPX, is an amazing thermal paste that just keeps its liquid viscosity, if that makes sense. And as thermal paste gets older and crumbly, that's when it stops transferring heat, and then that's when you start to see issues with GPUs and CPU coolers and stuff not performing their best anymore. I know this will continue to last top notch as long as it's in the system. So at the very least, I've gained some peace of mind of knowing the thermal paste that's in here will last. All right guys, thanks for watching. As always, we'll see you in the next one.